Millionaire wanted to be anonymous at his friend's barbecue. He didn't expect to meet her there. Ethan Cole hadn't worn jeans in nearly a year. But today he pulled on an old t-shirt, tugged a faded baseball cap low over his brow, and left his pricey smartwatch in the glove compartment. His Tesla rolled to a quiet stop 2 blocks from Mason's house, far enough not to draw attention. He stepped out, shedding the skin of success, the weight of expectations, and the version of himself the world had learned to admire. The scent of grilled meat and cold beer drifted toward him before he even reached the wooden gate. Laughter spilled from the backyard, mingling with soft country music. The scene loosened something in his chest. No investors, no pitch decks, no spreadsheets or strategic glances. Just a Saturday afternoon that smelled like college memories and sounded like real conversation. "Ethan!" Mason called from the grill, spatula in hand. "You actually showed." "You thought I'd chicken out?" Ethan grinned, stepping onto the wide patch of grass. "Burger or ribs?" Mason asked. "Dealer's choice, so long as there's no quarterly report on the side," Ethan replied, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. Foldable lawn chairs formed loose circles. String lights hung from trees to fences. Everyone was dressed casually, sipping from red Solo cups. No one batted an eye as he entered. No one recognized the founder of the country's largest online education platform. And that precisely was the point. In that moment, Ethan wasn't a CEO. He wasn't the man responsible for hundreds of employees. He was just Ethan, the 35-year-old who used to code late into the night in a cramped East Portland apartment, the guy who once dreamed of peace but had sprinted past it, chasing success. Ethan had just accepted a plate of burgers from Mason when his eyes landed on the far corner of the yard, near a cooler tucked beside the fence. A girl in a soft yellow dress and worn-out Converse sneakers was pulling a soda from the ice. Her long brown hair was piled lazily into a messy bun, with a few strands falling against her neck. She laughed, not politely, not performatively. It was the kind of laugh that belonged to someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone. A real laugh, rooted deep. Ethan stopped mid-step, not because of how she looked, but because something quiet and sharp settled in his chest, like someone had gently tapped the brakes on his heart. "Who's that?" he asked Mason, nodding toward her. Mason glanced over and gave a small nod. "Oh, that's Lily, my wife's cousin. Just moved back to Portland a few months ago. Go easy. It's been a rough year for her." Ethan didn't ask for details. He didn't need them. His feet were already moving. Lily didn't notice him until he was standing right in front of her. "Hey," he said, aiming for a smile that didn't feel like the one he wore in conference rooms. She looked up. Her eyes were deep brown, clear, observant, unreadable. "Hi," she replied. "I'm Ethan." He held out his hand. "Lily?" Her grip was warm, firm. "You one of Mason's crew?" "College buddies," he said. "And you?" "Wife's cousin, married to the guy who thinks he's king of the grill." She pointed toward Mason. Ethan laughed. "He threatened to kick me out for putting ketchup on my hot dog." "Criminal," she smirked. They stood for a moment. No small talk, no awkward shuffling. Just quiet. Ethan noticed she wasn't trying to impress him or disarm him. She was just here, present, grounded. It was oddly disarming. "Want a drink?" he offered. "I've got one," she said, lifting her soda. "But I'll come with you. Watching people fight over the last cold beer is entertainment." They walked to the cooler together, and the conversation flowed like a slow-moving current. She told him she'd just left her job in publishing back in Seattle after realizing it didn't make her happy anymore. Now she was living in her aunt's guest house, trying to figure things out. She hated small talk, loved thunderstorms, preferred silence over filler. What stood out to Ethan, she didn't ask what he did for a living, and he didn't want to offer it. Later that evening, they sat together on the lawn, a little away from the crowd. She turned to him and said, You don't talk like the other guys here." "What do you mean?" "You listen," she said. "Most men can't get through a sentence without trying to sound impressive." "I'm not trying to impress you." "Good," she looked right at him, "because I'm really good at spotting fake." Something in Ethan's chest drew tight. "I'm not fake," he said quietly. She studied him for a beat, then nodded. "I believe you." Music drifted from the back porch. String lights glowed overhead, and for the first time in a long while, Ethan didn't feel like an outsider. He was just a man who'd stumbled onto something real after wandering too far from it for too long. As the party began to wind down, folding chairs were gathered, the music softened, and the air took on a quiet calm. Ethan and Lily were still sitting in the grass, talking like time had forgotten them. "I should probably head in," she said, glancing toward the porch. "Yeah," Ethan replied, though he wasn't ready to leave. They walked together toward the gate. When they reached the sidewalk, Lily stopped, reached into her bag, and pulled out a napkin. She scribbled a few digits and handed it to him. "My number," she said, then looked him square in the eye, a hint of a smile on her lips. But no texting. Call. Ethan took it without a word, but the smile that rose on his face stayed with him the whole way home. Ethan stared at the napkin in his hand, the black ink slightly smudged at the corner, numbers scribbled with no flourish. He'd been hesitating all afternoon. His phone lay beside him, as if waiting for a call he wasn't sure he had the courage to make. For the first time in years, pressing a single button made his heart slow down. He dialed, lifted the phone to his ear. His palm was damp. One ring, then two. By the third, her voice came through, calm and laced with a smile. "You actually called." "I said I would. I figured you were the kind of guy who forgets." A fair assumption, but not this time. There was a soft shift on her end, the sound of someone settling into a chair or curling up under a blanket. "So what's the plan?" "Coffee, somewhere old. No Wi-Fi, phones off, just real people and real words." A pause, then, "That's dangerously close to clever." "So, is that a yes?" "Send me the address, but let's pretend we didn't plan this." "I'll pretend really well." So, for the first time in a long while, a plan was made, with no agenda, no pretense, just curiosity. The next afternoon, Ethan stepped into a coffee shop tucked away in a quiet corner of East Portland, a place so subtle you'd miss it if you weren't paying attention. The wooden floor creaked beneath him. The chalkboard menu was mostly erased. The barista didn't ask for names. Everything felt like it belonged in a different decade. Lily was already there, seated by the window, flipping through a paperback. She didn't look up as he approached. "You're late," she said. "I'm exactly on time." "Late people always think that, but you seem like someone who prefers being early." She looked up then, eyes playful, challenging. "So, you've been watching me." "Only when there's a reason to." She closed her book and set it aside. "This place smells like burnt toast." "Perfect, isn't it?" She didn't reply, but the curve of her lips said enough. They sat and let the silence ease into something comfortable. They didn't talk about the usual things. Instead, they spoke of childhoods and in-between moments. Ethan shared stories about growing up in a 2-bedroom apartment with his mom, a fiercely independent woman who ran a one-woman accounting firm, about staying up all night coding, trying to hold on to a dream that always seemed one bill away from collapsing. Lily talked about her third-floor walk-up in Seattle, where the roof leaked in winter and the neighbors yelled louder than the TV. "Strangely enough," she said, "silence is what I miss most." "Do you ever want to go back?" "Sometimes I miss the noise, but the chaos? No." "I get that." "No," she shook her head. "You don't. You don't seem like someone who ever slept next to an old fridge or shared a bathroom with 4 roommates and a raccoon." Ethan laughed genuinely. Okay, not exactly, but I know what it's like to want a reset. Lily tilted her head. You're hiding something. Aren't we all? You more than most. You speak like someone carefully editing every sentence. Ethan leaned back. And that bothers you? No, she said, meeting his eyes. It makes me curious. By the time they left, the streetlights had flickered on. Neither asked the other to walk them home. They stood beneath a tree near the sidewalk, wind brushing past and traffic humming in the background. I'm not going to ask what you do, she said, and I won't tell you. Good, she smiled. I like this version of you, whoever he is. She turned to leave. Ethan stayed still, the napkin still in his pocket. That night, he didn't return to his penthouse. Instead, he drove to a quiet hill overlooking the city, killed the engine, leaned back, and let the silence hold him. For the first time in a long while, he didn't have to be anyone but himself. In the days that followed, they didn't talk much. No texts, no social media updates. Just a quiet space between them. Strangely comforting, not distant. As if both were holding room for something slowly forming, unspoken and unforced. Ethan picked up his phone more than once, only to set it down again. Not because he was nervous, but because, for the first time, he didn't feel the need to rush. And then, on a rainy afternoon, with gray clouds heavy over the city, his phone rang. It was her. The rain fell in a steady rhythm, like the soundtrack of an old film. The city blurred behind the windshield as Ethan sat still, one hand resting on the wheel, his thoughts still lingering somewhere in that coffee shop from the other day. The way time slowed around Lily, conversations without rush, silences that didn't beg to be filled, made everything feel more real. His phone buzzed. It was her. "What are you doing?" Her voice came through, calm and soft, breaking the quiet around him. Standing in a sea of neckties, pretending they know what digital transformation means. So, not much. She laughed. "Come meet me." "Where?" "Fulton Rec Center, 15 minutes. She didn't wait for a reply. The line went dead. He'd never been there before. The community center sat tucked in an older part of town, its neon sign flickering half-heartedly. Rain still fell as he stepped inside. No music, no scent of coffee. Just the damp smell of old floors and echoes of forgotten games. The ceiling was high, lights too bright, casting their glow onto the polished gym floor. Lily was already there, standing mid-court, holding a basketball. Faded hoodie, jeans, hair tied back. She looked up as he entered and tossed the ball toward him without a word. He nearly dropped it. "Haven't played since high school." "Even better," she said. "No pressure." "You invited me here to watch me struggle, didn't you?" "No, I invited you because I needed a space where no one's pretending, and I think maybe you do too." They played, or something like it, shooting, passing, running in circles and laughing more than either of them expected. Ethan missed almost every shot. Lily didn't go easy. She stole the ball, spun, scored again and again. And Ethan? He was breathless, sweat dripping down his back, but he laughed like he was winning. Their sneakers squeaked on the wood. The ball bounced endlessly. Time didn't matter. For the first time in months, Ethan felt his mind go wonderfully blank. They finally collapsed on the bench by the wall, breathing hard, shirts clinging to their skin. Lily turned toward him slightly. "I'm good at spotting people who fake it." He met her eyes. "I'm not faking." "I know," she said quietly. "That's why I brought you here." No more words followed. They just sat, letting the sound of distant rain on the roof and the low hum of the gym lights say the rest. When Lily finally stood and brushed off her jeans, Ethan followed. They walked out into the cool, wet evening. The rain had stopped, but the world still shimmered with it. There was no goodbye, no promise of next time. Just a nod. Her gaze held his for a beat longer than necessary. Then she turned and disappeared into her car. Ethan stayed there, soaked and still. His shirt stuck to his back, his heart slowing in a way that felt almost unfamiliar. He knew this wasn't love, not yet. But it also wasn't just something casual anymore. In an old gym on a rainy afternoon, something had begun, and this time he wasn't going to let it fade. After that rainy afternoon, there were no official dates. No one said, "We're seeing each other." No labels, just a quiet rhythm that began to form, soft, steady, unspoken. One afternoon, Lily called Ethan to help when her aunt's old car got stuck in the garage. They didn't fix the car, but they spent hours cleaning out the dusty storage room, arguing over whether the Beatles or Fleetwood Mac was the greatest band of all time, all while 70s music played faintly from a speaker balanced on a shelf. Another day, she dragged him to a weekend farmer's market, picking tomatoes like she could read their memories. Ethan didn't argue, just carried the basket and listened as she told stories about setting her college kitchen on fire while learning to cook. He never imagined he'd remember details about burnt soup, but now he did. Sometimes they just sat in the car after a walk, watching the city flicker through the windshield. No talking. No need to fill the silence. Just knowing the other person was there felt like enough. Ethan had never pictured himself this way, a man who thrived on calendars, projections, and control, now finding peace in things that couldn't be scheduled. But with Lily, the small, ordinary moments became the ones that felt the most alive. No performance, no plans, just presence. It wasn't that they were alike. It was that somehow they made room for each other in the spaces where they were different. And sometimes affection doesn't grow from grand gestures. It grows from aimless drives, unplanned meals, and stories that seem silly but linger longer than any declaration of love. Time passed, not too quickly, not urgently. Ethan was still busy, still surrounded by meetings and projections, but something inside him had started to slow down, not in pace, but in thought. Every time he left Lily, a part of him seemed to stay behind, as if his mind never really left her porch or their quiet conversations or the sound of laughter during a day that wasn't supposed to mean anything. And then one seemingly ordinary day, while sitting in a room full of growth charts and projected earnings, he realized he didn't want to keep living in numbers, not the way he had been. The conference room was lit in sterile LED white, wrapped in glass walls and the quiet pressure of punctuality. Ethan sat at the head of the table, listening to the CFO present the company's expansion strategy into Asia. Slide after slide. Growth forecasts, revenue targets, regional integration plans. It was all textbook perfect. But Ethan's mind wasn't in the room. He was thinking about the old coffee shop with the creaky floorboards, about the afternoon they cleaned out a dusty garage while arguing about music, about how she picked tomatoes at the market like they held stories. These images kept slipping in between the numbers, and for the first time in his career, he didn't want to push them away. "Ethan?" A voice cut through. One of the investors leaned forward. "Any final thoughts before we move ahead?" He looked up. Faces waited, sharp, professional, expectant. "We'll move forward with the funding," Ethan said, voice calm. "But I want to pause the international rollout. Let's focus on domestic development first. Not faster, just better." There was a pause. The CFO blinked. The investors exchanged glances, but no one objected. "Understood," one of them replied. "We'll revise the roadmap accordingly." The meeting adjourned. Ethan stood, left the room without small talk or summary. He stepped into the back seat of his car and told the driver, "Take me east." He didn't call ahead. Lily looked surprised to find him standing on her porch, hands in his coat pockets, not tired exactly, but quieter than usual. "Did you get lost?" she asked, half smiling. "No, just looking for a dinner without spreadsheets." She tilted her head. "In that case, let's go." They ended up at a little restaurant tucked between two storefronts, exposed brick walls, mismatched wooden tables. No menus. The owner simply smiled and brought out food as he pleased. They sat in a corner booth under soft yellow lighting. Lily talked about her aunt's new haircut and a book she thought was wildly overrated. Ethan laughed and sometimes just watched her instead of responding. By the last dish, he set down his utensils and leaned forward. "There's something I should have told you sooner." Lily looked up. Her face didn't shift, just waited. "I run a tech company," he said. "We build educational data systems, high security, government contracts. It's big and heavy." A beat. "I'm not surprised," she said. "From the beginning, I sensed you were holding something back, but not because you were arrogant, because you didn't want that part of your life to define how I saw you." Ethan exhaled. The tightness in his chest loosened. "I never knew when to say it. I didn't want to break something that felt so real. So why now? Because you deserve all of me, and I can't keep walking beside you while hiding half." Lily was quiet. Then she nodded, slowly, deliberately. "Thanks for saying it." They walked out onto the sidewalk, street lights casting soft shadows around them. No big declarations, no sudden decisions. But as Ethan walked beside Lily on the uneven pavement, he knew something had shifted, not because she asked him to change, but because she made him want to. A week after that dinner, Lily found a small envelope taped to her door. No name, no return address. Inside was a single key and a folded note in familiar handwriting. "There's a gallery opening tonight. Wear whatever you love. I'll be waiting at 7. She smiled, folded the note, and left it on her table. At exactly 6:55 p.m., a black car pulled up. The driver opened the door without a word. But the car didn't stop at a gallery. It pulled into a private entrance at the base of a tall building. The doorman greeted her by name, pressed the top-floor button, and smiled like it had all been rehearsed. When the elevator doors opened, she stepped into a space bathed in soft gold light. Floor-to-ceiling windows. A jazz quartet played in the corner. It wasn't crowded. It wasn't flashy. But everything felt intentional. A small table stood at the center, dressed in white linen and soft candles. Ethan stood beside it. No tie, no blazer, just him, in a black suit that somehow looked more honest than expensive. His hands twitched slightly when he saw her. "You said it was a gallery," she said, walking in. "I lied," he smiled. "This is my home." She looked around. The silence was too perfect, the way light touched the walls and the art. "Why bring me here?" "Because I'm done hiding." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a thin gold bracelet. No gems, nothing flashy, just simple. And in the center, 2 words engraved. "Still here." "This isn't a proposal," he said, voice steady. "It's a promise, not made with words or papers, just with choice." After slipping the bracelet onto her wrist, Lily looked at Ethan for a long moment. Behind him, the city shimmered, high rises gleaming like they spoke a language she never really learned. "Ethan," she said slowly, "I don't want to live in this world." "What world?" "This one, the polished, calculated one, full of power and expectations, where every move is part of a strategy. I tried it, in Seattle, in publishing. I thought I had to keep up, but in the end, it wasn't meant for me." Ethan didn't interrupt. He just listened. "I want the messy things," she continued. "Late breakfasts, evenings spent reading under dim lights, a place that can be a little chaotic, but real." He nodded. No arguments, no convincing. Just stepped closer and rested his hand lightly on her wrist, where the bracelet still sat a little loose. "Then," he said, voice low and sure, "I'll come to your world." And somehow, in the simplicity of that moment, his promise felt heavier than any contract Ethan had ever signed in his life. The 3-story brownstone on a quiet Brooklyn corner didn't look like much from the outside, but on the ground floor, once a forgotten laundromat, now stood a little bookshop called Chapter 1. A name Lily came up with herself, simple but full of meaning. No Wi-Fi, no takeout coffee, no blinking LED signs. Just a soft bell ringing whenever someone walked in, the scent of old pages mixed with cinnamon candles, and Lily, behind the counter, sometimes reading, sometimes scribbling ideas for the weekend's book club. Ethan didn't own the store. He didn't treat it like a business. He was just there. At first, to help drill shelves, wipe dust, repaint the wooden door. Then it was rewiring light fixtures and fixing a leak from upstairs. Eventually, it became routine. Morning tidying, evening coffee, reading short stories to each other before bed. "You planning to read every book in here?" Lily asked one night as he buried himself in a vintage poetry collection. "No," he said without looking up. "Just planning to live in them." Ethan didn't quit work altogether, but he stepped back, relinquished his executive title, took on advisory roles remotely. No more red-eye flights, no more midnight emails. He could sit with Lily through an entire afternoon and never glance at the time. They lived simply, not as a philosophy, but because it felt right. Quiet enough to hear each other, slow enough to notice the shift in each other's eyes, honest enough not to pretend to be anything more than they were. Lily hung a photo of her family near the classics shelf. Ethan brought back an old typewriter from a flea market and placed it by the reading chair, because it looks like Hemingway used it and never returned it. On sunny weekends, they set out a small stack of books on the front step with a handwritten sign. "Take one. Leave something behind." Some people left bookmarks, others left notes. One said, "I found myself on page 47. Each night, they locked the door, poured wine or brewed tea, and climbed to the rooftop, where Ethan had strung up soft lights and added a pair of wooden chairs. Not a place to plan the future, just a place to breathe, to sit in silence, and to know, with quiet certainty, they had chosen each other. Nothing grand, nothing loud. But with each passing day, they were writing a chapter that needed no dramatic twist, only to be read together, one page at a time, never unfinished. That evening wasn't particularly warm. The air was still, settled, like it had paused to listen. In the backyard, where Lily grew mint and cherry tomatoes along the wooden fence, the quiet felt almost sacred. Ethan stood near the old table, holding a small box wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. No candles, no flowers, just the soft kitchen light spilling onto the grass and the buzz of summer insects hidden in the trees beyond. Lily stepped out the back door, barefoot, fingers still dusted with flour from baking bread. "What are you doing out here?" she asked, surprised to see him standing there, not on his phone, not reading, just waiting. "Waiting for the right moment," he said. "For what?" He looked at her, his eyes steady. No hesitation this time, just quiet certainty. "I used to think proposing had to be a grand gesture," he began. "A big plan, a stage, an audience. But I realized all I want is this, you, in this small backyard, barefoot, hands covered in flour, books stacked in every room." He stepped forward and opened the box. No diamond ring, just a thin silver band engraved inside with the words, "Let's keep building." "I want a life filled with old books," he said. "Arguments about commas, planting basil, debating the correct placement of your favorite reading chair." "I want you," he continued, "and everything you come with, messy, warm, imperfect. You might not need a grand promise, but I need to say it. I want to build this life, not alone, but with you." Lily didn't cry. She just looked at him for a long, long moment. Then she untied the twine, took out the silver band, and slipped it onto her own hand. "I guess," she said, voice soft but sure, "this means I have to let you keep putting that chair in the wrong corner? Or learn to live with you moving it 3 times a week?" She laughed and stepped forward, wrapping her arms around his neck. "I think we can keep building." And just like that, with the sound of crickets and a trace of flowers still in the air, they stepped into a new chapter, without a stage, without applause, just each other, and a silver band catching the light of the old kitchen lamp. The days that followed felt just like them, quiet, imperfect, full of unspoken warmth. After that evening, neither of them rushed to talk about a wedding. There was no countdown, no calendar pinned on the fridge. Just the quiet understanding, growing stronger with each morning coffee made for one another, each leaky pipe fixed together, each grateful glance at the end of a long day, knowing the other was still there. One afternoon, while rearranging books on the shelves, Lily paused. The golden light of late day fell gently across the worn spine of a novel she loved. She turned to Ethan, a soft smile tugging at the corner of her lips. "We could get married here," she said. They cleared the aisle between the 2 rows of classic literature. Chairs were borrowed from the corner cafe. Tablecloths were made from old linen Lily once used to wrap books. Soft golden lights hung low from the wooden ceiling, warm, not too bright. No stage, no elaborate floral arch, just the bookshop, as it always had been, quietly transformed by the presence of the people they loved most. Luke, Ethan's college friend, officiated the ceremony. Ethan's mother brought homemade cookies. Lily's aunt arrived early to help fold napkins. No tuxedos, no heels. A wedding where people could breathe and laugh. Lily walked down the aisle in a soft blue silk dress she once wore to an old book fair. Her hair was loosely tied with a ribbon, her eyes glowing with the same warmth that filled the store they built together. Ethan stood in a white shirt, sleeves rolled up, by the shelf where he once placed that flea market typewriter. No nerves, no scripted vows. As she reached him, he whispered, "We started here. I want to keep going. Here." They didn't recite long promises. They shared stories. First coffee dates, the fight over the sofa's placement, and the morning they realized they'd gotten used to each other's silences. The room held its breath as Lily said, "I don't need someone to fix my life. I just need someone to stay and help rebuild it piece by piece. You've done that, and I'll do that for you." Ethan said nothing. He just smiled, the smallest, simplest smile, and rested his hand on hers between 2 shelves. When they kissed, no one clapped loudly, just the soft flutter of a page turning in the breeze. Quiet, like how they'd entered each other's lives, not loudly, but deeply and truly. That night, after everyone had gone, they sat on the shop floor surrounded by hand-arranged flowers, a golden glow resting on an open book. "This wedding," Lily said, head resting on his shoulder, "doesn't look like anyone else's." "Like us," Ethan replied. And that was enough, a wedding with no stage, just the space they now called home. The wedding passed like a short poem, not dramatic, not flashy, but quietly unforgettable. No photos online, no long thank you posts. They returned to their daily rhythms as if nothing had changed, except the way they looked at each other, deeper, steadier, more complete. Love, they realized, didn't live in the big days. It lived in the small things they chose to repeat, together, every day. Ethan was no longer a CEO. He stayed on as a consultant for a few small projects, just enough to keep his mind working, but not enough to pull him away from the life he was building now. Meetings took up only a few hours each week. The rest he spent in the bookshop, in the garden, or in the kitchen, where Lily kept her tea and cookbooks in the same cabinet. They didn't make 5-year plans. No bucket lists. Instead, they read poetry to each other at night. sometimes Neruda, sometimes lines scribbled in old books they found by the riverside store. On weekends, they walked through the park, stopped by the bakery for toasted bread, and sat by the lake reading. Ethan carried a notebook, jotting down things Lily said that felt worth remembering, even if he didn't know why yet. They grew herbs in the backyard. Lily's basil always thrived more than his, something Ethan quietly resented, but never admitted. Every summer they repainted the porch. Every winter they argued about getting a cat. Ethan said no. Lily laughed and still secretly fed the strays behind the store. Sometimes they argued about Lily dog-earing book pages, about Ethan rescheduling his dentist appointment again, but always the quiet followed. Always one cooked while the other washed dishes. Always someone said, "Let's take a walk tomorrow." One night, Ethan stood by the second-floor window, warm tea in hand. Under the soft yellow light, Lily sat in her favorite corner, reading. Head tilted, legs tucked beneath a knitted blanket. She didn't know he was watching. She didn't need to. And Ethan smiled, not because of anything new, but because, for the first time in his life, he truly understood. This, right here, the quiet corner, the warm tea, her presence. This is what I've been chasing all along, and now, finally, I've chosen it and been chosen back.